Hi, my name's Glen Harris, University of Georgia, Tifton-Campus here, soils and fertilizers. I'm in the Crops and Soil Science Department. Been here for going on 20 years. Work cotton, peanut, corn, all the row crops. I've had a lot of meetings already this year, a lot in this building. Got to remember which crop I'm supposed to be talking about. So today is cotton, right? Okay. All right, good. But you might have seen in the thing, by the way, some of you know and some of you don't, but informal, if you got a question, I like answering questions. That way at least I figure maybe I answered something been on your mind. Got a lot of topics we can jump around. If you're more interested in one, just chime in. You notice on the sheet, I think it said fertilizing modern varieties, and I've been talking about high yield cotton. Of course, a lot of this whole high yield thing was coming out of some of the corn stuff. We had the corn short course yesterday. Corn been driving that, and really, you know, we've been making good yields even last year. We can talk about what happened last year and the year before. A lot of that is varieties. Obviously, we don't want to have fertilizer be our limiting factor. We got the potential in these varieties. You know, do we fertilize them very differently? Get that a question all the time. Will you fertilize this variety different than that? There might be some subtle things, but really, I think we got to just remember to stay with the basics. I think we get so caught up in sometimes is tweaking little things and we forget to do some of the major things like pre-plant fertilizer and all that. So we're gonna kick some topics around. That, by the way, was a plot at Sunbelt Expo 3 years ago that made 4.5 bale cotton. I know right where that spot is. I need to go back to that spot next year, see if I can't make it happen again. And what did I do there different? I didn't do anything different. I do it a lot of places. That was just straight old, followed a recommendation, do everything on time, put out the nutrients you're supposed to, and got lucky, I think. So anyway, one of the big things that was already coming up this year is we had a really wet year, as you know, last year, is where's all of our fertilizer? That's one place it might be. Might be in the Gulf of Mexico or Atlantic Ocean, I don't know. And it is good to think about, but really when you think about it, is nitrogen's real mobile. We usually don't have a lot of that left over anyway. We certainly don't probably after last year. And if you know, we don't soil test for nitrogen. So it's all based on what we think you need, et cetera. So nitrogen doesn't really change. Phosphorus is immobile, so it didn't get away from us. So what about potassium? Potassium's in between, so it moved on us. Now how far it moved, that's a big question. Did it move out of the root zone, past the root zone of cotton, or not? And where do you soil sample? We usually only soil sample to 6 inches. So don't be surprised if your potash levels are coming down. And I would replenish, follow the recommendation, and build that top 6 inches up again with good potash levels. The number one problem I think we've seen on cotton, I think we're doing a good job with nitrogen. As long as you're doing a good job with pH, that kind of thing, potash is probably the issue. You know that. I showed you a lot of slides over the years. Potash is probably one of the biggest issues. I mentioned pH, that's the other one. That's the other one that'll drop on us. So that's a really one. So really when you're looking at your samples this winter, look for drops in pH and potassium. And I think if we do a good job in replacing those, like I said, I'm not too worried about nitrogen and phosphorus. Micronutrients generally aren't very mobile either. And again, the micronutrients, things like manganese and zinc, it's all about that pH again. Don't get it too high, you actually tie the micronutrients up. So I think, you know, I think we can deal with the wet year. We've had wet years before. What did we learn about from last year? How to fertilize extremely wet cotton, drowned cotton, I'd even say. What did we learn, Gibbs? What did you learn about fertilizing?
It can move.
It can move. I also learned that if it's flat out, I mean, we've had floods before. My first year here in '94, we had the big flood, you know, but those floods, you had a lot of rain and then you kind of dried out, right? Last year it was like having a constant flood. It rained every day. And what I found out is that if you get the airspace and that volume of soil flooded, there's nothing that can happen. I don't know if this thing kind of froze up. Flooded my screen. It likes that picture so much it don't want to change. There you go. Man, that was really slow. I don't know what was going on there. Yeah, now I'm like that. Interesting. I've never had that happen before. What's he going to do? I'm going to have to do this thing without slides. We can do that, though. We can make it up. While it's deciding what it wants to do. Oh, look at that. That's what happens when you put 20 tons of lime out, by the way, right there. All right? It went right to my joke picture. How did it know? How did it know that, John Paul? Let's see if we can't start over and get back up here. I use this slide in my class all the time. A lot of people don't think about it, but if you take a volume of soil, if you take a coffee can and cut off both ends, shove it in the soil, and pop that out intact, about half that volume of soil is actually pore space. Half of it's solids, roughly. Half of it's pore space. That pore space can be full with air or water or both. What was it full with most of the time in June and July? It was slam full of water. No oxygen in the roots. It looks like nitrogen deficiency. I know a lot of folks put a lot of extra fertilizer on cotton when it was drowned, but when it's drowned, the only thing that's going to fix that crop before it dry out. And what we really got into the problem with this last year, and I'm not going to harp too much on last year, but we got out the third week of bloom and had no nitrogen out there. Now that's a problem because you know the recommendation is to put a quarter to a third of your nitrogen at planting and then the remainder between first square and first bloom. All right, so roughly, if let's say you're using 100 pounds of N, 30 at planting, 70 at side dress, and then maybe some foliar or roll on or whatever. But you're supposed to have all your nitrogen out by first bloom. By third week of bloom, I don't like to put any more nitrogen on the ground anyway. That's when we switch to foliar feeding. So what do you do when you get all the way out to the third week of bloom and you don't have any nitrogen out? That's hard to fix, folks, and some of you probably learned that. And but it's amazing how well our cotton did overall. We must not have had too much of that because if you look at our yield averages, we ended up doing all right. So anyway, keep some of those simple timing things in mind. But just it was kind of a rough year. Now, another thing about these modern varieties, what's some other characteristics besides their high yielding? They do fruit up earlier, and overall, it's a more narrow band of when they fruit. We make most of our cotton the first 4 weeks of bloom, right? So, again, which one do you want to talk about, nitrogen or potassium? Let's talk about potassium. That's the reason I like to have all my potassium at planting. All right. I know there's a lot of interest in adding more potassium at side dressing, but I'm not going to show you a bunch of data today like I did at the corn meeting yesterday, but I did some again this year, and even on deep sands, I don't see a huge advantage to splitting my potash. If you put all your potash out at planting, and I think the big reason is because there's kind of two schools of thought there. One is load that plant up early with potash so it can handle the demand when it gets there. The other one is to spoon feed it along the way. Well, potassium and nitrogen aren't exactly the same, and potassium doesn't spoon feed like nitrogen can. So I really want to see you put all your potash out up front. If you want to put a little extra at side dress, that's not a problem. Real sandy ground with a lot of rain, yeah. I mean, if you want to put some extra, I'm not going to argue with you. But you want to have a good amount out front. I've heard people say, well, I'm going to put 75% of it out front and then the rest side dress. That's fine. But you probably do just as well putting it all out up front, potash, and getting it loaded up. So you say, okay, you're telling me load up the plant with potash early. Why can't I put all my nitrogen at planting? Why can't I put all 100 pounds of nitrogen on when I plant cotton? You ever tried that? I've actually did it this year. I put it all at planting, and I split it like we're supposed to. I had an old data set where I actually did it all at planting, split, and all at side dressing. I don't know if you remember that or not. Anybody remember which all nitrogen at planting, or split like you're supposed to, or all at side dress? Which one worked the best? There's a hint in there, that part about like you're supposed to. All right, splitting works. That's why we recommend it. But here's the interesting thing. Out of all the nitrogen at planting or all at side dress, and I'm talking again between first square and first bloom, which one of those do you think did the best? Anybody remember?
Split.
Well, split does the best, but if you could only do it once, all at planting or all at side dress?
I'd say all at side dress.
All at side dress. You are correct. And the reason is if you put all your nitrogen up front, are you going to have any later on? Nitrogen is the most mobile and get away from us. That's reason number one. Reason number two is that cotton is a bit of a unique plant compared to things like corn and peanuts, etc. It'll want to grow vegetatively and not fruit. We talk about the vegetative reproductive balance. Well, that's what it means. It'll want to keep on growing stalk instead of going to fruiting, and you can mess that up and lose some yield potential. So bottom line is our recommendations haven't changed. Potash all at planting, maybe some additional at side dress to top it off, but nitrogen, make sure you do a good job with splits. Any question on any of that? Well, now I hit another button, man. I'm just having trouble with this thing today. What do I do? All right. All right, quickly, I put these in there to remind me. Seems to be a lot of interest in precision ag these days. Somebody told me because all the new tractors got GPS on them, so we're trying to figure out, might as well use them, right? How that translates back to me is a lot more grid sampling for soils. Should I go to zone sampling and all that? But one thing I put this slide in to remind me, to tell you and remind you is that one of the reasons we went to fertilizing cotton by yield goal is so that we could adjust to precision ag. When we get to the point where we need to get to the point where we're looking at that field and saying, okay, this area of the field has this yield potential, this one has this yield potential, we need to fertilize them differently. I mean, that's where we're heading. So don't forget that. We got nitrogen recommendations for, initially we only had 750, now we have 1,000, 1,250, 1,500. Again, 1,500, 3-bale cotton implies irrigation. Do we need one for 3.5 or 4? We might, hopefully one day. We'll see. That's nitrogen. These are the graphs for phosphorus and potassium, but I just want to put that to remind me. Also, I'm supposed to remind you there's a big precision conference, one in Georgia, Alabama, and somewhere else. I got flyers up here. Dr. Validas want to remind me. The one in here, right here in this building, is February 25th. If you're interested, let me know. I got flyers up here for precision ag. Any other questions on precision ag? I mean, this is a pH graph. I think variable rate liming is probably one of the best shots that we have to really help us since it controls a lot of other things. One other thing I wanted to mention too, though, this year on cotton is, fortunately, it was kind of isolated area, but we did have some spreader problems. All right, and I worry a little bit about some of our variable rate potash on cotton, and it's interesting because I got a call and they said the farmer thinks they messed up on the variable rate. It took me 3 trips and about a day and a half to figure out what's going on with the fertilizer dealer, the farmer, and the county agent. And you know, you got to go into those kind of things with an open mind. And what I was worried about is let's pretend this is a potash map, because they variable rated their DAP and their muriate of potash. The farmer put out his own nitrogen, so we don't think it was nitrogen related. So I'm looking for potash issues, right? And one thing I worry about is if you have a zone that needs a lot of potash next to one that doesn't need any, and you don't put any on the one that needs a lot, that's a problem. Did you follow me? I think I said it right. That'd be an easy thing to mess up. But so what are you looking for? I'm looking for, again, let's pretend this is the potash, and I got the potash map. I didn't want to tell who it was or whatever. But so what we did is we went out there and we found a zone like that where it was supposed to need a lot and none. I thought, well, if that's a problem, we'll see problems right in this area somewhere. Well, guess what? We took a bunch of samples and we couldn't nail it down. I don't think it was a variable rate spreader problem in that case. So, but just keep an eye out for that. Don't forget, things will show up as potash, but you might have a nematode problem. Seen that a lot too. True or false? You can fertilize your way out of a nematode problem. You must have done it. You must have tried. You'll lose your wallet doing it. So unfortunately, that's a problem. If you've got nematodes, take care of them. pH, take care of them. Any other questions on precision ag? What are prices doing? Anybody been tracking fertilizer prices? They're going up. He said they're going up. Somebody told me yesterday they're going down. Down a little. Potash was supposed to go down, wasn't it? All right. Obviously, that can factor in what we're going to do. I'll update that slide for, I don't even have 13 on there. I guess I'll put 14 on there too. Any questions on lime? pH is critical.
What you talking about there?
Dolomitic versus calcitic, good. To me, there's kind of two issues going on with lime right now. Dolomitic versus calcitic, and then this issue with high rates. Dolomitic calcitic is a pretty easy one to answer, in my opinion. You realize dolomitic lime has calcium carbonate and magnesium carbonate. By Georgia law, by the lime law, you have to have at least 6% magnesium. Used it for years. Good source of calcium, magnesium, and brings pH up. Calcitic lime is calcium carbonate. Doesn't have any magnesium in it. All right. I don't know if I got that graph in here. Yeah. I don't have 11 and 12, but if you just go back to 2005, this is tons of lime used in Georgia as reported by the Department of Ag in Atlanta. 2005, almost 700,000 tons of dolomitic and what, 50 of calcitic. But just in that 5 years or so, look what happened. 300, dolomitic came down to 300 and calcitic went up. There's a lot of calcitic lime being used right now in Georgia. All right, it's cheaper. Of course, in my opinion, it should be cheaper. It doesn't have any magnesium in it. And if you got to buy magnesium above dolomitic lime, you got to use something like K-Mag. It's more expensive. Nothing wrong with it. Obviously, it's just more expensive. So dolomitic's a cheap way to get your lime. So, you know, is there something wrong with calcitic? No. But is it the answer to everything? No. I mean, it's another liming source. And the fact is it doesn't have magnesium in it. So what I tell folks is that as long as if your magnesium, look at your soil samples, if your magnesium levels are good, and what do I mean by good? I probably want them in the high range, around 60 or a little above. Sure, use calcitic lime. Keep soil sampling, see your magnesium levels come down. How far down? I don't know. Getting down towards medium. I don't want to get into low. Get into medium, around 30s. This is all Malick 1, by the way. Waters or our lab numbers would match up. Go back to dolomitic lime. I mean, that's pretty straightforward to me. And again, is calcitic the answer to everything? I mean, again, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's not the savior, I think, that some people are trying to make it out to be. Any questions on that? Does that answer your question?
That is an answer.
All right. They also talk about flooding the base saturation. Flood it with calcium, all your other problems go away. I don't know if I even need to go into that. Well, I might as well. Okay, thanks, Johnny. I will. All right, so a couple terms. I don't know how familiar you are with them. Basic soil science, again, a slide I use in my class here on UGA Tifton-Campus. And I'll try to boil this down, make sense of it. Soils have a net negative charge. They have positive and negative charges on them. They're net negative charge. Where do those charges come from? Basically two places. They come from clay and organic matter. All right, now right away, do we have a lot of either of those in our soils in South Georgia? Clay or organic matter? No. So our CECs are on the low end. Looks more like this depiction of the soil. This would be more like a Midwestern soil, okay, with a lot of clay and organic matter. So automatically we're over here, okay? So you got negative charges. This is just like magnets, opposites attract. So these negative charges from clay and organic matter can hold things, and all these are what we call cations, positively charged. Hydrogen, which you know is responsible for acidity and pH, but then things like calcium, magnesium, one of our nitrogen forms, ammonium, sodium, which we don't have a lot of problem. You hear people talking about, oh, do we have sodium problems around here, salt buildup? No, we get 100 inches of rain last year? On sandy soil, we don't have salt buildup, all right? And then there's potassium. All right? So all those things are held. And they don't form new molecules when they bind, they just kind of get held, just like magnets do, and they can pop off and get in the soil solution and go taken up by the plant or stay on the soil. This is what holds your fertilizer, basically, your calcium, magnesium, some of these important cations. All right, so that's cation exchange capacity. Base saturation simply is, of those negative charges, what percentage are taken up. And they call them bases. Technically, they're not bases, but because they have to do with hydrogen and acidity, they call them bases. But what percentage is taken up by these different cations? All right, so that's what base saturation is. All right, so the theory with this high rate of Lyme is flood the soil with calcium, knock all these things off, and have calcium here. Well, what's the problem with that? You knock things like potash off, magnesium off, they actually can, if they don't have anywhere to stick to, will actually get away from us. And you could have problems with potassium, for example, on cotton. So I don't think it's a good idea to use these real high rates of Lyme, because number one, you're going to mess this up and you're going to knock these off and not use it. That's the first reason. The second reason is what's 20 tons of lime do to your pH? Anybody know? You know, the pH range goes from 0 to 14 with 7 neutral. You'd think it'd go to 14, right? But actually tops out about 8.3, they tell me. I've never done it. I might do it next year. I'll let you know. But you're going to have problems with too high a pH instead of too low, and you're going to tie up things like manganese. So another reason not to. Here's the other thing, is that anybody use UGA soil test recommendations in here or seen them? All right. Do we report base saturation? We don't even report it. Now some of the private labs do, but we don't. Why don't we report it? Because you actually don't really even need it or use it for the fertilizer recommendation. I mean, it's good to look at. I mean, yeah, you probably want at least 50% of your base saturation is calcium, more probably around 70. You don't want it to be 100. So, you can look at it, but when it comes right down to it, we don't use that base saturation to adjust your fertilizer recommendation. I tell folks, if you fertilize according to the recommendation, this kind of stuff takes care of itself. If you lime the pH of 6 to 6.5, put the potash out you're supposed to, this will kind of take care of itself. All right, does that make sense? Johnny, that make sense? It does to you. Good. If you got any more questions, what's that? I'll be around all day. So.
How much more likely is calcium to be held there than those other elements?
Great question. What determines how these things are held are two things: size and charge. So the order is, and I don't even have aluminum out there. The more pluses you have, the better you're held, and the smaller are, the better you're held. Okay, so in order, hydrogen's pretty small and one charge. Aluminum's held the strongest, and ammonium and sodium. Sodium's a big one, so it doesn't get held very well. That's another reason why it leaches out on us. So ammonium gets held pretty well, and calcium and magnesium are in the middle. So calcium and magnesium are going to be held stronger than potash because it's 2 charges versus 1. And again, that's another reason why I worry about potash, because it will get knocked off easier than calcium and magnesium. I think that's what you were getting after. All right, we're getting some good soil science in today. This is good. You'll all be PhDs. We have honorary certificates when you leave or something. All right. Well, if any other...
Soil being so wet, full of soil samples, does that happen?
Good question. I wasn't going to address that too much, but since you asked me, I will. I think that is an issue. The question was pulling soil samples when they're real wet. And that's not quite related to this, but it's pH and all that. pH is what I'm worried about. How do you measure pH? It's an electrode. It measures the potential from these hydrogens floating around. We call it active acidity floating around in there. Okay? What can happen when the soil is really wet is it can flush some of those out, and you can actually get what we call a false high reading. Now, how wet's too wet? I tell people if the water is running out of the soil sample bag, it's probably too wet. All right. Now beyond that, I'm not sure. You know, it's kind of a judgment call, but there's no doubt if you go out there and it's sopping wet and you take a soil sample, don't be surprised if you get pH back and you're going, that looks a little high. It shouldn't be as high as that is compared to what I had last year. All right. There is a way around that, and actually our lab, the UGA lab, changed about 3 or 4 years ago. We thought everybody else would change and nobody's changed with us. We actually measure our pH in salt, and that actually takes care of that problem. So one thing you could do is if you really question that, you might want to send it to UGA and just double check, because measuring it in dilute salt, which is a perfectly acceptable way and takes care of some of these things, might give you a little clue on whether you're on target or not. The other way, how else you can handle that? Wait till it dries out a little and take a sample again. But you might not want to take a lot of samples when it's real wet, because you might end up having to recheck a lot of them when it comes to pH.
I pulled some, and the dirt was wet enough, I knew it was gonna mess the bag up. So I just laid them out, and they dried out. You know, is that gonna affect the pH reading?
Great question, and I get confused myself on that, but it probably will, because at the time that you sampled it, you didn't have the salts in there, so they're probably not in there. That's right. That's right. Yeah, and I have to think how long after it dries out before you can go back in and get a better reading. That's a good question. So, but it does have to do with the salt and the water issue is why that affects that. So just something to keep an eye out for. I don't think it's going to be a huge major issue, but I'm glad you brought that up, because that can be a problem. Good. All right, what else we got? There's your manganese chart. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but there's no doubt that county agents all have this if you need it, that the higher you run your soil test pHs, you want to stay above the line in this case so you don't have a manganese problem. You have to run your soil test manganese higher. And that's becoming an issue because we're not using as many micronutrients and complete fertilizers, etc. Now if you're using chicken litter, you might be getting some manganese, but you really need to track some of these manganese and pH levels, and you got to look at them both. Because for example, say you're running your pH at 6.0 and you got a soil test manganese at 8, you're good. But now you lime and you take your pH all the way up to 7, and to be honest, I don't get too nervous about pHs being too high till we get above 7. But now you got a 7 and you got an 8, and where are you? You're well below the line. You're probably going to have a manganese problem. So it's a simple relationship. Just stay above the line. You're up here and you say, well, I don't want to put a bunch of manganese on. Well, let your pHs come back down a little more reasonable. You can always spray manganese in the meantime. Okay? Any questions on that? We don't see too many manganese problems on cotton, but we can get them. Yeah, micronutrients are almost tailor-made for foliar because you don't need a lot of them. I mean, the recommendation is only like a 1/4 pound of manganese foliar, as long as it doesn't get washed off, as long as you get it in the leaf, and as long as you do it fairly early. You don't want to wait till 4th week of bloom. If you got a manganese problem, you want to take care of it, hopefully before bloom even. That's where an early tissue sample would help. But micronutrients like manganese, zinc, and boron, all foliar feed very well. You know we have an automatic boron, 1/2 pound, and I like foliar for that. You can put it on the soil, but really if you want to make sure it's in there, again, as long as you don't get washed off, put some boron in with one of your early sprays when you got some leaf area. Good way to spray boron. Good questions. Potash. Do we need to visit stem Filium at all again? Just remember right now, this was a leaf spot we were dealing with. Now we got 2 different leaf spots, and they are very different. Okay? For a long time, Dr. Kemerite and I worked on this one. It's called stem Filium leaf spot. We also get Alternary and Cercospora. I remember, Johnny, when you were still here, we talked about that a lot. We get these a lot late in the year, but the problem is they were coming in early, and they were all related to potassium deficiency. See that yellowing in that leaf? That's potassium deficiency. That makes the plant susceptible to this leaf spot, and it can defoliate the plant if it gets bad enough. Which reminds me, sometimes later in the year, you see this come in, load up, drop all the leaves, but guess what? It's the best cotton in the field. Why is that? Because it had such a bowl load, it drained all the potash. You know, if we could figure out how to do that, we could save some money on defoliant. But I don't think we figured out how to do that yet. But anyway, you got to fix that with potassium, because spraying a fungicide ain't going to help, because your main problem is potassium. You can also, I had this question yesterday, you can get to severe. Once you get to that point, I don't think even foliar is going to help you. That's severe potassium deficiency and severe stem Filium infection on a plot. Dr. Kemmerwright and I did in Colquitt County. Scott Brown, the county agent at the time, said, I can guarantee you this field will have stem Filium, and he was right. And we had dramatic response to the potash and also the stem Filium. We also found out that we had stem Filium, we still got it on the leaves, on the good potash, on the green leaves, but it just never got real bad and took over and hurt the plant, it seemed like. It was still there. But when a plant's hurting for potash like that, leaves get on it, it'll wipe it out. All right?
So you were fixing that with a foliar application? Is that what you said?
You might be able to fix this one.
Yeah.
Or even a little earlier. This is getting severe. But once you get to there, that's going to be hard to fix with foliar. It's too far gone. So again, that's why I want you to do a good job with potash at planting, soil applied, and then, you know, you start looking like, and hopefully if we have time, I'm going to share with you. Has anybody seen me share my project I did this summer using these helicopters to fly over the field and look for problems? You know, if we can catch potash problems early and fix them with things like foliar or maybe some more soil applied if it's early enough, you know, we can avoid all this stuff. But that leaves too far gone to fix with foliar, I can tell you. So. Petioles sampling are great if you do the old program where you're taking them every week. But my experience has been we've gotten to where we say, well, we'll run out there and do the petiole just one time. So many other factors can affect it, water conditions, fruiting and all that. You're almost better off taking a tissue, even in the bloom cycle now, because they can be so erratic. I used to say take a petiole, even a spot petiole will help you, but I don't know. So that's the short answer to that one. Petiole is great, but a lot of people just don't seem to like to take the time to do it. You sample every week starting at bloom, track them. If you do that program right, you can really, I think you can do a good job. So. But here's the other leaf spot I want to show you, just so you know. It's called, they started out calling it Coronespora. And then by the time I figured out how to spell and say that, they changed it to target spot. I should have started with target spot. And this is a close-up of it. They can look similar early on, but it's a little different. This one, potash, it's bronzy. You get that stem Filium on it. This one will occur in the middle of the canopy, a lot of times on your better cotton. A lot of times you don't know it unless you're out there walking through your cotton. Need to talk to Bob about this one, because this one is not related to potassium as far as we know. And this one we think you can do some good with a fungicide. So see the difference? Stem Filium, potassium, fungicide doesn't work. Target spot, it's not potassium, and a fungicide may work. So you really need to know the difference to fix it, okay? If potassium's involved at all, it's probably too much potassium, because this has a tendency to go, like I said, your better cotton, maybe even your rank cotton. And it's kind of a little known fact. We all know that putting on too much nitrogen can make rank growth, but the combination of too much nitrogen and too much potash together can make rank growth. Okay, and you might set yourself up for target spot. So just keep that in mind. Any questions on that? Talk to Bob about what to spray and all that. I'll get into trouble if I start making fungicide recommendations. Another topic I want to touch on. Fertilizer, and I'm going to get into trouble probably a little here, but we don't have an official recommendation for what, I'll tell you 100 pounds of nitrogen, but I'm not going to tell you exactly what to use. There's a lot of ways to do it, a lot of nitrogen fertilizers out there. If you want to look at what's sold in Georgia, again, these are numbers out of the Department of Ag Lab. They're 2010, but they probably hadn't changed a whole lot in the last couple of years. This is in thousands of tons. We're using very little anhydrous, although I had talked to some corn growers yesterday about using anhydrous. There's pockets of it. Ammonium sulfate, We use that a lot to blend in and get some sulfur, and it's acidifying, so we don't use that as our main nitrogen source. This is all crops, by the way, just not on cotton. This is for everything. So this is cotton, corn, and a lot of pastures and hay fields. Ammonium nitrate and urea. And these numbers have flip-flopped in recent years with the issues with ammonium nitrate, Oklahoma City, etc. These numbers almost have flip-flopped in the last 10 years. We used to sell about 60,000 ammonium nitrate and 25 urea. Now it's changed, so we're selling more urea. But look at nitrogen solutions, liquid nitrogens. And again, they're usually not as concentrated. You know, you're talking things like 32 and 28 and 18% compared to urea, which is 46%. But we're selling and using a lot of liquids. All right, so I started out by doing some trials on both corn and cotton, looking at liquids compared to other liquids and solids compared to other solids. But there's been some issues with some of them. I thought it'd be good to put them all in a head-to-head competition. And this is where it's going to get a little tricky and dangerous. But first of all, we could talk about what all those are made of, but I'll probably just confuse you, and if you want to talk to me about it. But what's interesting is these nitrogen materials are all different. For example, I don't have the solids on here, but obviously urea is all urea. Granular urea is all urea. Ammonium nitrate is about half ammonium and half nitrate. But liquids like 32, it's about half urea, a quarter ammonium, and a quarter nitrate. Another liquid we use is 19, or you can add the sulfur to make it 18-003. It's 60% ammonium, 40% nitrate, no urea. All right. Urea's got some issues like volatilization and other things we can talk about. Somebody looked at that and said, man, that'll never work for us, too much nitrate. It's going to leach away from us. And I had been showing this slide for 2 years, and Kevin Phillips with Pioneer said, well, heck, it's not that different than ammonium nitrate. We've used ammonium nitrate for years. It's 50-50. This is just 60-40. And it turns out it works pretty well on cotton, as you've probably seen me show before. There's even one, and this was a great idea, I think. Make it almost equal parts, ammonium, urea, and nitrate. Sounds great, great theory. Guess what? I don't think it holds up to the others, and I don't really know why. I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew why. But I look at the data. I got 3 locations. 2 are irrigated, 1's dry land. Of course, dry land last year, might as well have been irrigated, right? So, but what you got, and we're not going to spend too much time on here, but this was just across the street, irrigated cotton. These first 4 are solids, ammonium nitrate, urea, ESN, which is a polymer-coated urea, and CANS, which is calcium ammonium nitrate. And then the rest are liquids. This is 18%. I don't know why it says 18,000, but 18% and 19. This has sulfur and this does not. 28 and 32. So this has sulfur and this does not. And then that 24%. And, you know, I got the letters up there because bars followed by the same letter are not statistically different than each other. Of course, as growers, what do growers always do? They look for the highest one and the lowest one. I mean, I'd do the same thing if I were you. But if you look at this, what do you notice? What stands out to you? Some of the higher ones. Ammonium nitrate, CANS, 18 look good. 18 even looked a little better than 28. But the other thing that stands out, this 24 is not as good. Look at urea. All right? Maybe it's a fluke. All right, well, let's look at the next one. Also irrigated, Sunbelt Expo Moultrie. Same lineup down to here, but this is 34 blend. You know, you can buy a bag of 3400 and it ain't ammonium nitrate. It's urea and ammonium sulfate blended. And then here, this one I had an untreated check where I didn't put any side dress nitrogen on. So that one came out the bottom, right, like you're supposed to. But what do you see again? I'll be darned if ammonium nitrate ain't up here and urea's down here again. All the rest are kind of up in there. All right, sorry. It's the way it come out. So then just when you think, well, urea never works, we got this one. This is on our, we rent some land from ABAC just down the road here. Good, really good Tifton soil. Here's your untreated check, only made 600 pounds. But with 60 pounds of nitrogen side dress, this time urea did okay. And for some reason the polymer didn't do, polymer coated one. I don't think it was released on time. That's the problem with these polymer and slow release ones. And we can talk about that too, but I got some questions about that. Great in theory. Oh, we'll have this stuff slow released, so it won't leach. But what happens when you're not released when you need it to be released? You're going to back up. So I'd be careful with that one. Plus, it's more expensive. So I think it's got some issues. But anyway, we'll keep looking at this, do some more years. Last year was really wet. Maybe we won't see quite the same trends in a drier year, and I'll let you know. Any questions on any of that? Don't ask me my favorite. I'll tell you one-on-one. Somebody asked me yesterday, well, can I put a volatilization, like something like a agritane or something on the urea to make it work better? And we've done some things to look at the volatilization issue. I think issues with urea are going beyond volatilization, again, beyond what I can explain, but anyway. Talked about split potassium. Do we need to talk about chicken litter at all? We got 10 minutes. Yes, please? Okay. I could give you the whole 50 minutes chicken litter. I won't do that to you. Some of the basics. I don't know, has anything really new happened with chicken litter that much? I think we got it fairly figured out. I saw an email the other day, don't stack it by the road where all your neighbors can see it run into the ditch. But I just thought that was common sense. But, you know, do we really need to tell you that? I don't know. Some of the things, and chicken litter is not as uniform as commercial fertilizer, as you know. It's not as high of analysis, but when you put it out, I like about a 2-ton rate on almost anything, including cotton. We used to say, and originally it was a 3-2-2 as far as percent N, P, and K. Now we're saying 3-3-2, and it's almost borderline getting, I don't know why. I don't know if they changed what they're doing with them chickens or the bedding or how long they leave it in there. There's a lot of things they can change, but it's almost getting to be, some of it, a 3-3-3. I say that, and that's an average analysis, but you really need to get it tested because some can be 3-3-3 and some might be a 1-1-1. Or what's the lowest you ever seen, Johnny? What?
According to what kind of house it comes out of.
Yeah, and I don't know this, but if you lock into a poultry litter source and you get it from the same folks and they don't change anything, it should be pretty consistent. But I think where we get into trouble is all of a sudden, hey, I don't have any, I ran out. Go down the street and get it. And that guy had it stacked out behind the house, been rained on for 3 years. I don't know.
Houses compared to broiler houses.
There's difference. Most of our stuff is broiler, but layers will be different too. That's true. Layers has got more water. It's going to be less concentrated. But let's just, for sake of argument, say it's a 3-3-2. You put fertilizer prices on it, and then something some people forget to do is put availability factors. The nitrogen is not as available as the nitrogen in a bag of fertilizer. In fact, nitrogen is only about 60%. I use 50% just because my brain, I can cut numbers in half better than I can take 60% of them. I'd have to get my calculator out to do that. Anyway, but what you can do, if you want to know the value, and that's the biggest question I always get, what's the value of a ton of chicken litter? And guess what? It goes up and down with fertilizer prices. I have a slide that shows you 2005 when we were low, 2008 when we peaked, and then I can bring you up to date to current, and it changes. It's the same chicken litter. The only difference is the price of fertilizer's changed. But if you want to try to calculate a value, 3% of 2,000, if I did my math right, 60 pounds of N I don't even have my right numbers on here. I probably changed them. I had 70 cents per pound of N here instead of 60. 70, and there's your availability factor, 60%. You multiply that out in a ton of litter, about $25 worth of nitrogen. 60 pounds of phosphorus times 55 cents times 0.8 availability, about another 25 roughly. And then potash, 40 pounds, 60, so you see what I mean. And a pretty high number. What's chicken litter going for? More like 35. I always make somebody mad and somebody happy when I show this slide. The guy that's buying it for 35 feels real good. The guy selling it for 35 gets mad at me, okay? But I can't help that. Now, one thing you notice, that's the value if you need all these. What if you don't need phosphorus? And if you're using chicken litter for a long time, you probably don't need a lot of phosphorus. You got to take $25 off that. So my math's not real good, but what's 70 minus 25? It's getting down there. So 45. Getting about what they're selling it for. So A lot of people like to put a value on other nutrients, organic matter, a little bit of liming capacity. Some think it's got nematode suppression. I just think it stinks and makes them mad. And then weed seed, everybody thinks it's loaded with pigweed seed, but I'm not sure the pigweed seed is in the litter when it comes out of the house. Now, it might get on the pile after it gets out of the house. And one thing for darn sure, it'll grow a good pigweed. But I did a study with Stanley Culpepper one time, and we put the equivalent nutrients out as commercial fertilizer and chicken litter, and guess what? We had pigweed everywhere. There is something we think in chicken litter that makes pigweeds scarify the seed and makes them germinate and all that, but you're going to have to deal with pigweed no matter what. Anyway, that's the value of it. 2 tons per acre pre-plant. Still come back with some side dress commercial nitrogen because a part of that nitrogen is ready to go and a part of it's slow release. And I don't want to be in slow release when I need the nitrogen between first square and first bloom. So I think if you look at about 2 tons of litter and, I don't know, 40, 50 pounds of side dress nitrogen, in a lot of cases, that'll make a decent crop. Unless you're on one of those by God sands or whatever, Panama City sand. Any other questions? That answer some questions of chicken litter?
Glenn, I hear a lot of folks say chicken litter helps cool land, but they claim to see yields taper off and start down when you continue to use it on good land. Have you heard that?
On good land? Great question. You know, Gary Gasham, my research counterpart, before he retired, did a long-term study on a Tifton soil in strip till, and I think higher rates, and as he went, you almost get a buildup of too many things and not good. So I certainly wouldn't pay $45 and put it on my best land. I'd pay 35 or 40 and put it on my poor land. That's where it's going to get the most value. I'm not sure, Johnny, what's happening on good land, why repeated use would, but you know, it might be, it might.
You have a big build up of zinc.
Well, zinc's is interesting because right, this is a cotton medium. A lot of you guys grow peanuts too. And, you know, zinc, peanuts are very sensitive to zinc. But we found out that we used to get nervous about 10 pounds of zinc in our soil, but as long as you're willing to raise your pH up to about 6.5, you can probably handle 20 or 30. And I normally don't see them that high unless you're really doing something wrong with your chicken litter, putting it on the same spot every year, 20 tons per acre. I don't know, Johnny, that's a good question. I wouldn't put it on my best land repeatedly anyway, though, personally. Maybe that's all you got is good land. That's a good problem to have.
20 years is my sole source of NP and K.
Mm-hmm.
And sandy dirt got 3 tons, clay dirt got 2 every year back.
Mm-hmm.
That's for 20 years.
Making decent crops? Good, good. Yeah, your nitrogen, phosphorus, your phosphorus is probably building up a little bit on you than when you want to, but until they make that illegal, you know, you're all right. Foliar feeding, I'm going to skip. Let me cover real quickly in 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 3 little projects I got involved in. I can do this real quick. Walmart waste, liquid lime, and UAVs. All right, anybody seen me give this talk yet this year? All right, good. Quickly, the Walmart waste. Well, let's do the liquid lime first. Real fine liquid lime, not like the old liquid limes you might have been used to. Super fine. It'll go through, I think, a regular sprayer. It's fine, so it should bring the pH up real quick. I told the company, yeah, I'll look at it. I wasn't sure. I thought, I have no idea. We put it out through this rig with a flood tip nozzle. We put it on actually corn, cotton, and peanuts. And we even put it on strip till. And you can see it got hung up on the rye residue. But if you look at what it does to pH, it's amazing. It doesn't look as bad, but if you condense this scale, we started out, what's that, May 1st, just below 6. And in 2 weeks, that liquid lime brought it up almost to 7. And I thought it would crash, but it held. Compared to a ton of lime, it took a little while to react and get up here. And then that's what no lime did, stayed down here. It worked pretty good, folks. Now, what it's going to cost, that's another issue. And the other issue is I put it out at 166 gallons per acre because they said that's what would be the equivalent of a ton of lime. Obviously, you don't need that much. In order to make this line match this line, I don't know how far you got to go, maybe 60 gallons or something. So we're going to keep on looking at this. We're not ready to recommend or anything. Interesting part about this is you could probably put it through a pivot. And if you've gotten one of those hurry up rescue, I got a low pH, I want to plant tomorrow, you might be able to put it through the pivot till it in and plant, and in 2 weeks that pH would come up. So it's kind of interesting in that standpoint. That was conventional till. That strip till, I don't know what happened here, but the liquid lime did the same thing, but look at my regular lime. That kind of surprised me. I don't know what's going on there. That kind of thing leaves you scratching your head. Walmart waste real quick. There's a company that has the contract to take all the waste. You ever wonder what happened to the waste produce, bakery items, and citrus at Walmart they don't sell? This company comes around. They're stationed on some big cattle farms in South Georgia and North Florida. They grind it up. They feed the solids to the cattle. They got a liquid left over. They said, oh, this has got to be good stuff. Got to have nutrients in it. They said, think of it as V8. All right? They send me a 5-gallon jug of it, and I uncap it, and guess what it smells like? I put it this way, my technician, and she's got a sensitive nose, she refers to this as the vomit study. All right? So, enough said. They got some issues, and I said, if you look at the analysis, it's there's 44 pounds of N, 9 phosphorus, 18 in 1,000 gallons. So I said, all right, we put this out with a honey wagon, 1,000 gallons per acre, we're doing something. They said, no, we think you can put it out at 30 gallons per acre. I said, really? I'm getting a pound of N and less than a pound of N and P and K. I didn't see anything. So besides, oh, by the way, I said, this stuff stinks. They said, we can put some orange flavor in it. So they sent me another jug. Open it up, guess what? Now it smells like orange flavored vomit. Okay. I shouldn't be too hard on them. They're trying to do the right thing, recycle, find a use for it, and we'll keep on working at it. We'll see what happens. All right, I don't have a lot of time, but real quick, you've probably seen this in the farm magazines and all that. Why is there all this interest in flying these little helicopters and taking images of your fields and all that? Got involved in this project. It was a big project down at Sunbelt Expo. But basically, they can be either fixed wing or some kind of helicopter, 1 blade, 4 blades. I saw one with 8 blades, I think. And they're pushing, the Federal Aviation Administration is pushing Congress by fall of 2015 to lift the restrictions on how you can use these things. And they think agriculture is a prime, great example. You know, yeah, in urban areas, there's issues, and there's always privacy issues. But if we can fly over fields, like this cotton field of mine, that's my alleys I cut with a mower. Those are 40 foot long by 4 rows wide every plot, and that's about 6 acres worth. That's an early picture in June. This is a measure, it's a multispectral camera, infrared, near red, and you do this calculation called NDVI. Greener is better. There's June, and look at that. I don't have time to tell you all, but I had nitrogen trials with that's a low end array, and that's 4 rows wide by 40 foot long. It can pick it up. Down here I have nitrogen only, potash only. Trying to see if I can pick up the difference between nitrogen and potash. Guess what? You really can't. This tells you whether you're growing or not. You're gonna have to go out there and look and try to figure out why. So that was a cotton field. You can look at other color schemes to pick things up. That's a real camera, what I call a real camera. They looked at me funny when I said that. They said, oh, you mean an RGB camera? Red, green, blue. That's what your digital camera you pick up at Walmart is. Looks a little different. Maybe we'll be able to pick stuff up. Also, takes time to get this image. This is about 6 images stitched together, all geo-referenced. You can lay this over a Google map. It's not as simple as you think. I didn't do it. But I know it takes time, etc. I did yields on the varieties. There's a peanut field. There's a peanut field after digging. Look how it looks a little funky. And anyway, we learned a lot. Ask me about it later on. Our time is up. I don't want to make you late. Any quick questions?
Have you done any work with pop-up on cotton?
Yes, I have. Yes, I have. Pop-up, 10 gallons of 10-34-0, 2x2. I don't like putting stuff in the furrow. I don't like to burn cotton out and have to replant. In strip till, I would definitely lean towards using starters. Starters don't always give a yield advantage at the end, but overall I'm probably a pretty big fan of it. You look at, if you go to the entomology talk, they'll talk about thrips damage and getting out of, getting that crop to grow and get out of thrips damage. little starter can help you in that. So overall, I'm a pretty big fan. Good question. Yeah.
On the limestone, did you incorporate it?
Yes. So except for that strip till plot, the other ones we did. We sprayed the liquid lime. We hand applied the dolomitic lime, and then we tilled it all in. Yes. Yes, we did. Good question. All right, I'll be around all day, so if you got any questions, come see me. Thanks.